There's been a couple movies that I watched that I want to talk about, but the last couple days have been the most awful, hot, fucking balls ass shit. So didn't want to just be sitting here like, like having heat stroke at me, like, so. And anyway, got my three fans going on because it's still very warm. So first one I want to talk about is the new Final Destination Bloodline, and of the sequels, this is probably one of my favorite ones because it just like, and I always do the whole comparison like Saw movies and stuff where like they just got to a point where they're like, fuck it, let's make it ridiculous, let's make it outlandish, let's not even like there's the lore thing they got going on, but like let's just fucking go. People want to see what they want to see. We're gonna give it to them, you know. As a millennial, you know, we fear log trucks. There was one time I think I was in the car with I think my mom or something, and we were behind a log truck, and I was like, "Mom, get to the next lane," and she was just like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Get to the next lane, please." You know, it wasn't like full fuck off logs. It was, you know, like little stumpies, but those things are so heavy and they, you know, anyway. So, this one called Bloodlines because it's not like the like the main protagonist doing the whole like we're going on a mundane thing and then like disaster strikes and the thing happens, you know, and they're like, I just saw what happened, or like, you know, I just had this premonition. It's like we gotta go, you know, that whole thing. So it's, you know, back in like the 50s or whatever, and there's like this kind of almost CN Tower Space Needle kind of shit going on, and you know, as they're going in there, it's like this couple. They're like, "Oh my god, it's not even open yet," and the guy's like, I pulled some strings, da da da," and you go in there, and of course it's like fucking, you know, the elevator is like already wonky, and I'm like, no. I would have been like, no, man, I'm not doing this. Bye. Oh yeah, obviously I'm gonna go into spoilers, but this movie has been out for a bit. Um, so yeah, like they go up there, like I said, wonky elevator to get up there. You know, there's like the glass floor kind of stuff. There's like a jazz band and all that stuff. You know, flambe, whatever food and all that shit. And then while they're doing that, they're like, could you believe they built this 5 months early? 5 months? I get if it's like, I'll give it 2 weeks. I'll give something like to be faster by 2 weeks, like building something like this. I'll give it 2 weeks. 5 months. This is made out of fucking, you know, mud and crackers kind of shit. You know what I mean? I used to work at a very um, well-known place in Times Square, and I had to drill some signage into the wall, and it felt like the wall was made out of crackers. You know, just you know, okay, cool. I guess I'll put another screw in. I mean, it's stuck in because I had the big fuck off, big wood screws to screw into whatever was behind the cracker mud facade of the wall of the lobby of this place in Times Square. Anyway, so yeah, there's that, you know, there's all, like, again, there's all this, like, sus shit, you're just wondering, like, what's gonna happen. There's this little shit kid, and I have this whole thing about children in horror, which is, like, they're either the evilest thing, or they're gonna be the reason why you die. You know, it's always like, we have to stay quiet, honey, and it's like, mommy, why? And it's like really loud, you know. You're like, shut the fuck up! Ah, I want my toy! You know, and it's like, cool, now we're dead. You know? Or it's like, hey, why is there like, hey, it's 2 a.m. Why is there like a child T-posing? You know what I mean? On the corner, like, or like around the block from you, like, you know what I mean? It's like, huh? Anyway, this little shit kid, you know, and he's just, I don't know who, did they ever explain, like, whose parents it was, like, this kid, anyway, a little shit kid. So, fucking, you know, the guy ends up proposing to her, and she's like, oh my god, obviously there's still more, like, obvious signs, like a woman's hat flies off, like, all this shit, right? And then, you know, people are dancing, the floor, the glass floor is cracking, and it's funny, it's like, I know people are dancing, but, like, they're not even, like, looking down, like, especially, I don't know, I feel like especially, if, like, it's the 50s, you know, I would be looking down, because even, like, when it was the 90s, and I went to Canada for the first time, we went to the CN Tower, and it had the glass floor, I was just like, you know, my mom was like, no, I'm not stepping on that. I like, you know, I've always been a big person, so I like, scooch. I didn't, other kids were like jumping on it and running on it. And I was like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I don't have that type of confidence in things. But anyway, and then I think was like years later I went back and then I was like, I'm going to walk on this. I mean, I think by then I was a teenager. So I was like, cool, if I die, I just die now. No one understands how I feel. I listen to Korn. And Mudvayne, Anyway, so I'm so different. Anyway, so obviously disaster strikes, right? And like that part was so crazy. Like people were just falling and hitting the building. Like it's just like like in Titanic when that dude fell and then he like hits the propeller on the way down. It's like that. Like all this shit happens. Everything. The elevator guy was like, we gotta take the stairs, and then like something hits, and then like the little boy got to the stairs, but then like the woman and the elevator guy were like, fuck, so they had to turn around, figure out a way, right? So, and it was so funny because like the woman, she's like holding on, like, oh, I'm gonna fall, and then like the grand piano falls, the little boy gets down, and he's just like, yeah, I got out, and then that fucking grand piano slams on top of that child. I watched this at home, but from what I heard is that people in the theater cheered like crazy during that. And I would have too. I feel like if Paul was with me, he would have screamed. He would have been like, that's what you fucking got! Like, he would have been that guy, That was great. Just like, child death in horror movies. When they're little, like, evil shits like that, which is, like I said, children in horror movies just in general are evil shits, whether they're good or bad. So that happens, then like she falls, her head goes through like this like rebarb, and then she's like kind of thing, like so instead of her like telling her boyfriend, or soon to be fiance, like, hey, I don't want to go, I'm getting some bad vibes from this, they went, and then she pretty much was like, stop it, and like saved everyone there, whereas usually they're like, oh, I'm not gonna do this, and then there's still people dying, kind of like in the first one with the plane. Like the plane still blew up, people were still on the plane, blew up. So even with the scary highway scene, the highway shit still happened, but not the people on the on-ramp or off-ramp, whatever. On-ramp, you know what I mean. So because of that is where we get the Bloodlines thing, where then death follows like the fucking, like the lineage of all the people that were there, at the party at the tower that day, night, evening, and then because subsequently then they all had families, and like it all branched out and all that shit. And so now, modern day, we have this, girl who's been like having these dreams and screaming in school and all that stuff, and then she had to take some time off from school because they're like, yo, like you're on like academic probation. And she's just like, okay, well, I'm kind of mental, obviously, because I'm falling asleep and screaming in class. She goes back home, it's almost rom-com like I'm in a big city for college and I go back to a small town kind of thing. She goes back home. And, it's discovered that, like, she started getting the vision. She started getting the shining once her grandma, who is the woman from the beginning, who, has been kind of, like, avoiding death all these years. She lives, like, in the middle of nowhere, like, all in, like, her own little shelter thing. I don't know how she's been surviving, kind of stuff, because she's like, I haven't left the house in so many years. And then all I'm thinking is, like, does she order, like her Amazon packages and they leave at the gate, but she hasn't, like, stepped out of the house? So do they buzz? I guess she buzz in and then she opens, like, the spiky gate of doom. And I don't know. Like, does she still pay taxes? Like, she's not really off the grid. I don't know. There was a lot of questions about, like, how she lived in her, like, big old shack. Funny enough, like, surrounded by spiky things, which you would think anything in a Final Destination movie that, like, even though it's facing outward, like, remember in the first movie where the boy, like, where Devon Sawa's character, like, tumbled and then just, like, stopped, and then there was, like, a, that part, like, oh, man, that first one was so good. And so, whatchamacallit, yeah, so the girl visits, like, her grandma, and she's like, oh, well, like, death is coming for me slowly because, you know, like she's got like a type of cancer or something, you know. Um, and like little things start happening, like, oh, something was moved, and then so then like the sunlight immediately, like, oh, we got this hot ass sunlight, you know, just like reflect on a mirror on like a, like, you know, like a plant she has hanging, you know, on like the freaking jute on the twine, whatever shit she got there, which also again had me thinking, like, if you want a like Final Destination proof home, you wouldn't be like hanging things from the ceiling, whatever the fuck it is, you know what I mean? Like, what do you do? Oh, but she needs her plants, and these plants are the hanging type of plants, so she needs that type of plant. Like, girl, maybe forego that. You know, maybe the type of plants you like put on the floor in a planter, not a thing you hang. You know what I mean? And it's like those plants are never like light either. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's still gonna like not like cause damage, but like it's gonna be something, you know. But again, that's just me. That's like the part where my brain goes in like super nitpicking, especially it like that's where my brain goes into like when it's like time travel movies where I wait, if you did that and then, you know, that kind of stuff. Anyway, so the girl goes visits like, you know, her grandma and all that stuff, and everyone kept saying like, don't talk to grandma, like she's nuts, and like we got away from her. Understandable. So then then grandma has like her book of like, this is how I survived all these years, and also in her book is all the other shit that's happened, like from the first movie to whatever, even like the prequel movie, that shit, when they did that was dumb. I think that was the one I hated the most. Anyway, so yeah, so she had like all the things like how to survive and da da da. I don't know, I feel like the book How to Survive is like, it's like, don't do shit, you know, just sit and don't do anything. But anyway, so of course, then like the daughter was like, "No, grandma, I think like dad was right," and then like she finally like steps out, like actually steps out of the house. You know what I mean? Like, dude, out the threshold, the wind hits, and she's like, "I knew it." Like she was just like, "I knew it." Hands her the book, and she just kind of like embraced, and then just like predicted how her death was. Something went back her head, whoosh, and it was like, ah, you know, which was pretty crazy. So that's pretty much, yeah, like the rest of the movie was just like little bits of people like in the bloodline, you know, dying. They're like, oh, that's your brother, that's this and that, and like so all this shit starts happening, you know, like the cousin, she was just like, I'm tired of your garbage, and then somehow gets like hit, and like she gets hit with a soccer ball and just falls into a garbage can. First of all, bitch, you weigh as much as like a poster, like it just how much she weighs. You get hit by a soccer ball and you fall into a fucking, you know, garbage can, and the automated garbage like can thing, and she's like, ah, you know, all that stuff. And I also like how like the main girl is just like, yo, like don't go over there. They're like, why? They're like, oh well, the landscaper is accidentally gonna hit the thing, and that's gonna do, you know, like she saw like the Rube Goldberg machine shit going on, and then they're like, yeah, whatever. And then again, that happened to the cousin. She died, you know. And then it's like, when you find out that the weird cousin, you know, the tattoo cousin, like, oh, he's like half brother and all that shit. They're like, oh my god, well, he ended up dying too. He kept having so many of the false death things, that the previous movie is why everyone got like pissed off at that one, because the movie kept doing like the edging you thing, but with like ridiculousness. This one, it was like, oh, he stood there, and then like a truck, you see in the trailer, the truck like buzzes right behind him kind of stuff. There was like, oh, is this tattoo shop gonna be lit on fire? It was all that shit happening. But then like when he died via like, you know, all like his piercings, his cock piercing being put into like MRI machine, and just like, and then like the fucking, you know, wheelchair goes through him kind of stuff. I find that ridiculous, because like I'm like, one, that's why my plugs now are silicone. Two, I don't think these aren't like magnetic though. That's the thing. Like I'm trying to be like, there's the magnet doesn't stick to. Magnet doesn't, like, yes, these are metal, but the magnet aren't sticking. That's also like the thing that gets me annoyed whenever people do the whole like, oh, like, you know, like a metal detector might pick up something, you know, funny, especially in that region, because usually people might like conceal a weapon there. Haha, giggity. But like, it doesn't light up like that. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it like fucks up like in X-rays and stuff. Like when I, I'll go to my dentist and he do like those crazy like 360 scans and you're like, can you take out all your piercings? And I'm like, oh, okay. They hand me like this like tray and I'm like, uh. They're like, your teeth are fucked. I'm like, I know, I'm poor. Anyway, so, but yeah, like they don't. Anyway, that's also a joke I hate when they're just like, pew pew, you know. So yeah, because he has a fucking dick piercing. That's how he dies. Like that's so crazy. But yeah, so then obviously you knew like no one survives. That's the thing. Like no one survives like these movies. Even, oh my god, Tony Todd. Let's go back to that. Tony Todd. That's his final film. And then his last lines. It was just like he was talking to the audience. You know, kind of like, all right, guys, I've done. You know, I mean, you know, he's obviously like. We could tell like throughout the years he was like starting to drop a lot of weight. When Paul and I finally met him a year ago, you know, we were like, hey man, like, cause we wanted it, like, was it like, well, like the one, cause he was always like going to Monsterpalooza, and I've been going to Monsterpalooza for 10 years, but at the time we were, you know, it was like 5-6 years, and we were like, oh yeah, we'll see him, and the one year we're like, the year, 2019, when I made the Candyman costume, I'm like, oh yeah, he'll be there. The one year he's not there, the next year fucking lockdown happened, so then finally we were like, yo, we gotta go see him, packed the Candyman costume, and we're like, hey man, we've been for 5 years, we're waiting to meet you, or whatever shit. And he goes, yeah, I'm really old, I like to stay home. We're like, it's all good, like blah blah blah. Then 6 months later, it's like he died, and I was like, bro, you know, it was crazy. It's crazy to realize like someone like you've like admired all these years, and you see him and finally meet him, and he's such a sweet man, and then 6 months later it's like he's gone, and you're like, it's crazy. But yeah, like Tony Todd's character, you know, dies off screen, but you know, you find out lore wise, the reason why Tony Todd's character knows all this lore and all this shit is because he's the little boy in the beginning, in the premonition part, where he's the son of the lounge singer, the jazz singer woman, you know, and he has like, he's playing with a train that comes into play, you know. He plays with a train and all that stuff, and you learn that lore, and then yeah, so pretty much like I said, like no one survives. So at the end, we're like, the brother and sister were like, yeah, like we all survived, even though like uncle whatever, cousin whatever, they're all dead, but us siblings were alive, and we're cool. It's your graduation. I'm so proud of you. And then like they live in these like, you know, I don't want to say they kind of look like prefab out, you know, like I call them cut and paste houses right by like the train tracks, which is always like, people usually who live by the train tracks are like, you know, the poorest people, but now like everywhere you go, they put like luxury condos right by the train station, because none of those people like live here, they contribute the taxes here, but they're all, you know, I mean, granted, I also work in Manhattan and all that stuff, but like I've been here for, anyway, let's not go into that. But it's, you know, it's like that type of shit. So like, you know, then all of a sudden, like, what was it? Oh, there's like the penny, the whole thing with the penny that like the little boy like stole from the fountain and caused like the whole ruckus shit. Penny like flies out from the book or whatever the fuck, and then like fucks up the rail changing on the train tracks, and then the train derails, and the siblings aren't running fast enough. I'm like, I don't know, I would suddenly become like Usain Bolt, like Michael Johnson, you know, with like, I'm not a runner, you know, got very bad knees from too many years of ice hockey and skateboarding, but dude, I would be like, phew, you know, if there's like a train derail and it's like blah, 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 like right behind me, dude, I would be running like crazy. None of this look behind me shit. I would just be going like none of the looking behind, run kind of shit. And then of course one of the train cars is a log train car, and then the siblings stay like, okay, they got away from the train derailment, and that was the part that got me mad, because they were like, oh, it all stopped, and instead of being like, let's I would still go like another 500 years, but then they were like, oh, okay, and then like behind, you know, whatever, you know, physics, and then like two logs come and just like fall on them, and they're just like all that stuff, and I'm like, yeah, you dumbass. Like I laughed at that part. I was like, oh, of course, because I was like, well, they survived the train thing, what's next? Like, again, a random bus, but then it was like logs, and it's like always comes back to the logs, because the the advertisement for this movie was insane. They had like log trucks driving around saying like Final Destination Bloodline, and I'm like, great advertising, but I don't need the heart attack. I remember I showed Paul and he's like, fuck that shit. He's like, no. He's like, I don't care how fake it is. Yeah, wow. You know? The shared trauma by like all millennials. Like, nope. It was like, there was some video like Paul showed me, and it was like some like, you know, it's like a work truck, like pickup truck, and a log went through the front seat. Everyone's fine, but the front seat, you know what I mean? But everyone's fine. And then, you know, all the comments where people were like, did ya not learn anything? Like, it's true. Like, don't. Nope. None of that shit. We ain't playing that. But yeah, like, this movie was, he said it was fun, you know, because you're just like seeing how people die. It was great to see Tony Todd. The ridiculousness of the whole bloodline thing. Like, I like the idea of that, of like the reason why it just took so long and, you know, all that stuff is because it went through such a mass of people that were at that event. You know what I mean? Because again, like, they survived, they have families, and their families have, you know, that kind of thing. So it took so long for death to like come down the line from 1950 whatever to, you know, fucking, you know, 2025. It's like, all right, like, I like the idea of that, you know. But yeah, so it, like, that was good. But yeah, like the whole thing with like how the grandma lived, and it made me just go, hey, wait, it's, you know, kind of thing. But again, the deaths were insane. You're just like, sure, let's go, let's do this. The little false, like, oh, this is probably the way how they die. You could tell, like, it's not gonna happen. Again, it's not like that previous movie where like the girl is on like the balance beam and there's just like that screw that just land perfectly like that, you know, and she kept missing it, like it's like here and her foot kept being like, and everyone kept being like, eh, and finally, like, you know, she like does the tumble steps on it, and then like, what was it, like chalk, the chalk and the fan, and then she like flips and then just like folds in on herself and dies like that, and it was like, like, it wasn't even like, you know what I mean? Like, the woman at the salon where, like, oh, the scissors got close to her face and everything was fine until she opened the door and then, like, a rock hit someone's lawnmower and it poked her eye out. It's like, God. It wasn't satisfactory, you know what I mean? But anyway, yeah, so that was Final Destination Bloodline. You know, it's fun. You know what I mean? Like I said, of all the sequels, that's the most one. My camera just died. It's the most one. Bye!